Een zeer goedemorgen iedereen, alleszins. Very good morning everybody. So I will click that slide forward and let's go straight into the presentation. So digital disruption was already ongoing and COVID-19 has only accelerated the digital ecosystem. What we see is that discussion topics have changed. Before COVID, the main discussion points were about how can I save costs, how can I be more efficient, and today it's about speed to react, respond to disruptions in supply chain. What is happening now, and is it really happening? And how do we know it is really happening? It's about risk management. And what if this goes wrong? I have to move from China to Europe. What is the impact? Do we have to pay more taxes, duties? Will it increase my freight spend? Our customers want to know how to drive automation and automate feasibility so you know exactly what is going on. What is happening in the factory? Where is the truck? And what is the condition of my reefer on the container terminal waiting to be shipped? These kind of questions. But also automation of the business processes itself. And the more I can automate, the less people I need to have. It's also about automation on the shop floor, in the warehouses. I think about robots, think about drones. People start to be more and more a risk in the supply chain. And just to give you some more perspective, reliable supply chains, as we know, are dead. We thought the ship is going from A to B every day. But it's not the case anymore. We have to plan that this can go wrong. Business disruption was already ongoing. COVID-19 made it just more visible and is accelerating digitization. And newcomers are digital, and you know they have no legacy, and these are the lucky guys. But also your biggest competitor. Holding back change will result in business to decline. And this is not a time for cosmetic changes. We've got to make bold moves. It's about big steps, incremental changes, 2-3% improvements. It's not good enough. We've got to do things differently, fundamentally different. And 20 years old legacy customizations on top of customizations, are they still valid today? Historic data is useless. You can't rely on that anymore. And think about planning systems using historic data. It's all about what is happening now. It's about real-time, short-time vision. Not what was the sales in September last year. This Industry 4.0, all the machines I have, can I monitor them remotely? Predict failures? Predict quality issues before they actually happen? Preventing a recall that can cause serious brand damage? So the ultimate benefit of improving insight and collaboration across the supply chain is to help organizations to orchestrate and continually improve supply chain performance. So making sound decisions quickly is more essential than ever. So the key is to know sooner, to act faster, and adapt. Every department has its own forecast based on its own set of information and assumptions, their own interest, their own KPIs. It's resulting in mistrust and blames. I think you all probably recognize this kind of discussions, you know, between sales, between manufacturing operations, logistics, supply chain, and the CEO is in the middle of this, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know, and this is resulting in inventory losses or maybe shortages. It's all about balancing supply and demand. Planning is more critical than ever before. One version of truth, one set of assumption is key. And if you also need to include short-term and real-time data, if you need scenario planning, what-if analysis, if you want to know what the impact of the decision will be on finance, on your cash flow, on tax, if you want to make decisions fast, then I know that Excel spreadsheets will not do the job anymore. My colleague Enrique, he will explain how technology can help you to be better prepared when the unexpected happens in the new normal. No.
Let's go through the flow that I prepared. So we will see how this proposition is defined, the value that we want to bring to the table, and why we believe that this is a differentiated value proposition in the market. I also wanted to offer you a glance on the software we are using, so we can go from PowerPoint to real enterprise class software that enable that vision, and then a couple of customer stories. So let's go first to define what is the problem that we want to solve with IBPX, right? And so during the last 20 years, this proposition has been around. So this end-to-end planning dream was from the beginning part of the design of every business model. And so what had happened during the last decades actually is that each one of the software vendors, as technology became more available, we were providing different point solutions to the different line of businesses. So you were working in marketing and sales, or you were working in supply chain, you were getting point solutions to do, logistics planning, materials planning, or strategic planning if you were working in finance, and so forth. And what had happened is that after all those point solutions were deployed, what we see today is that there is a big barrier in terms of visibility and the ability to execute. And so how can we check on this fact, right? So there are quite a few ways to prove that point. I just selected here a few KPIs from PwC, for a big survey that they make every year about KPIs that relate finance and operations. And as you see in the screen, we could see that net working capital or the days of inventory on hand during the last few years, from 2013 to 2017, the industry as an average didn't improve. On the contrary, we deteriorate those KPIs. And what that tells us is that the current tool set, the current set of applications that are provided to the industry are not good enough to do the job. So in other words, what we see today, that because of the competition that is heating up, because of the globalization problems, because of the continuous disruption, all those things that didn't happen so aggressively during the last few years have created this situation where we see no way of improvement using the current tool set. The other one that I wanted to call your attention on is this quote from McKinsey. So executives in the companies have that impression already. So they believe that their executives are making decisions slowly, and they don't have the proper level of quality. But take a look at the last quote from Bain, right? So even in the situation where you have all those line of businesses aligned, you have a consensus plan already agreed upon, you know what to do. When you try to move that plan into action, then you lose a lot of value that was in that plan, right? Moving that into action inside of that complexity that we generated on the left-hand side of the screen, creates a lot of breakdowns in terms of execution. Right, so those are the three reasons why we thought that we needed to think again this framework and to see how we could structurally change that so we could avoid these problems that I mentioned, right? That we are not able to improve in the KPIs anymore. We are taking decisions far too slow and with low level of quality. And when we move plans into action, then we lose a lot of value into the plan, right? Those are the key objectives of this redesign. And what we did in Oracle is we took a look of of the current available technology. And we believe that obviously we need to deliver on what the market is expecting in terms of being able to have one single view on the plan and use the same data set by the different line of businesses. But at the same time, just creating the plan end to end will not be enough. Our opinion is that to improve in those areas that we determine as a problem, we need to focus on one angle of the framework. And this is, we need to be able to detect unexpected events that could affect future performance in our plan. So detecting those events is critical. And then, you know, as you see in this graphical representation here, there is a lot of latency associated to managing that unexpected event. You know, in this axis, you can see the value that we can generate when we know about this event specifically. But before that, we need to detect that event. We need to be aware that that happened, that, you know, there is a disruption that just came up in the supply chain, that the truck was arriving late, or there is a new market because, you know, our competitor just went out of business in one of the regions. Or so detecting those events take time and technology to do that. Then you need to determine what to do with that event. In other words, is that event relevant for you? See, if the truck is late, you could check whether or not you have that part on hand. And if it is overstock, that event, the truck being late, is totally irrelevant for you. Now, the same situation, but you know, you have a material shortage, and that part was in that truck, and the truck is arriving late. And you know, that is critical for one of the projects that you need to deliver to your customers. This is a complete different situation. So determining whether or not those events that were detected are relevant for you takes time and requires technology. And then finally, when you're sure that the event that unexpectedly happened definitely will affect your performance, then you need to determine what to do with it. Can you automate the reaction to that event? Or you know, you need to look for a new plan. You need to manage that event. And once you create that plan end to end, how do you move that plan into execution? You need, again, more technology and time to do that. So during all that time, you are losing value. There are a lot of things that you could do at the beginning that you cannot do at the end of that curve. Bear in mind that some of the technologies that we have today even allow us to predict that that event will happen, right? So it's very important to understand how to use, for instance, IoT to predict that a particular bottleneck in the production line will go down. And therefore your you know, the output from that line will be different than the one that you were expecting. So you could predict that and act before the event even happens to that, right? So, you know, being focused on this detection of unexpected events and being able to manage them as fast as possible is key to improve on those KPIs that I mentioned before. So we decided this. We decided to create a closed loop. So instead of just doing planning, we wanted to connect plan and the plan execution. And this is the loop that we propose to do so. So in one hand, we obviously propose to put in one single planning hub every one of the planning activities that appear in the previous slide, right, regarding to each one of the different line of businesses. So everything related to planning in one planning hub with one single data model underneath. Then what we want to do is we want to move those plans into execution seamless, basically with a click, with a return in the keyboard. So we send the new replan orders seamless to every one of the areas that need to know, our production area, our logistics area, finance, and so forth. And then once those plans are in execution, how do we monitor those plans and, you know, detect those events I was mentioning before? How do I automate them when possible? And if I cannot, then closing that loop and starting again, right? So that's the basic design that we wanted to implement in the all very well-known IBP framework. And that's the reason why we define this solution as IBPX, Integrated Business Planning and Execution. From a business domain viewpoint, how is this working, right? What this solution we are proposing is real software. It's composed by different applications and analytics, and how is this working? Well, so what we do is we have like those 4 areas or layers to work with. There are different ways of presenting that concept. I will use a couple of them, but I want to make sure that I get that idea clear to you guys. And so we have a long-term planning layer where we do end-to-end planning with a time horizon of 3-5 years. And here, all the line of businesses get a consensus about the market goals long-term. So that layer is on top of what we could call a classic S&OP, sales and operations planning layer, in which the 4 line of businesses are trying to execute within the year the fiscal targets. That normally is an horizon about 24 months. And here there's just the objective that they have collectively, those line of businesses, is obviously getting the fiscal year targets on the table. Now, once this is happening normally, once every month, if there is no special events to talk about or emergencies, then within the month, each one of those line of businesses, they have their own planning tool set, right? So they are, the financial area, they have a finance planning tools to execute during the month according to currency fluctuations or any difference that they see in profitability and so forth. In supply chain, it's about balancing demand and supply to maintain the target and agreement that you got with the rest of your colleagues before the start of the month, right? And then what we do is adding this new layer of close to real-time event detection and monitoring, where we find out about those events that could affect the current or future performance. We try to automate them when possible. We will see some examples, and when we cannot do that, then what we do is we send that signal back to the proper planning layer. So this cycle needs to be run again and execute from top to bottom again, right? So that's the way we wanted to deploy these applications to enable this end-to-end business framework. We do have bill of materials in the Oracle portfolio that can deliver that business framework end-to-end. And this is kind of, again, a representation between plan, execute, monitor, and adjust, and that talks about how our bill of materials in terms of applications map that particular framework. So we have from our EPM areas, we have the proper applications to do this integrated business planning, where we connect finance to the rest of the operations in the company. We have the sales and operations cycle workflow manager, and then we have demand management and supply planning, doing our sales and operations execution area, keeping an eye on profitability. And then we monitor and adjust using IoT, sensor information, analytics, and so forth. So, the differentiation I was mentioning before is clear, creating that closed loop. We do have the proper applications and roadmaps, and this is important. This is not only stitching together different elements from one vendor or several vendors. You need to make sure that the roadmaps implement continuously the innovation needed. What do I mean by that? So we see that going in the direction of implementing IBPX is like a maturity journey. In the past, we were creating concepts like sales and operations planning with the intention of modifying some KPIs, the same thing with IBP. And what we wanted to do here is try to fulfill the market expectations to generate net new business value. So in other words, it's not only about the closed loop cycle that we wanted to put forward. We wanted to showcase here, how do you generate net new business value with the technology that is available today? So in other words, what can you do today with the technology that is available that you were not able to do 3 years ago, right? So it's not only just the restating the classic framework in that closed loop, but it's also embedding new business processes that you were not able to execute before, right? I'm going to give you some examples, obviously, for for the reasons of time. I will not be able to go very deep and very long, but I wanted to give you some, at least some examples, as I said. So one of the things that we did is we included the best practices that we found by industry in the solution. So in other words, we obviously, for instance, included a formal professionalized workflow that includes the sales and operations cycle, where we do, the product review, demand review, supply review, finance review, and executive review in a formal process using social media internally, so you can communicate to each other properly and speed it. There are rule engines that determine alerts. So each one of them, the persons involved in doing the replanning get automatically those alerts when the condition gets through, right? And so other things in terms of best practice is being able to do simulations inline, right? So without leaving the application. So you should be able to check whether or not the new conditions that you are seeing in the new plans could be met or with the current constraints or not. And we wanted to include that into the best practices that we delivered. This is another example also in the planning area. Normally you will see that obviously in our application and other applications from different vendors, we use predictive analytics with different set of algorithms, right, to predict future events. In our case, we wanted to go one step further, and especially for the long-term planning areas, we wanted to introduce new technologies to simulate risk involved in different scenarios. So we wanted to introduce, for instance, in this case, we decided to incorporate a Monte Carlo simulation to strategic modeling. So we can, again, evaluate the risk involved in each one of those scenarios that are simulated by Monte Carlo. And we create here, for instance, in this example, about 500 different simulations before issuing a final assessment on the risk. This is a classic business situation that everyone is trying to do manually, and we wanted to automate using the current technology that we have available today. So this is a case in which, and the reason why this call could happen is there are a lot of reasons for that call to happen, really. But imagine that you are running operations, your supply chain, and you get a phone call from, for instance, your CFO, right, or your sales head, and the discussion goes normally at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, where you have no reaction time, basically, to what will be a potential requests in terms of being able to reschedule materials with your suppliers and so forth, right? And imagine that in that situation, at the end of that period of time, you get that phone call, and for instance, from your CFO, and say, all right, Patrick, we are running a little bit short in revenue for this quarter if we're reporting to the street, and I would like you to pull in some revenue from the next quarter into this current quarter, right? And And because we wanted to close that gap, if possible, before the end of this time period, before this quarter. And this is perhaps 2 weeks before the quarter is finished. So your reaction or your capability to call suppliers and everything is extremely reduced. Your capability to modify capacity is not existing, and you need to figure out how to answer that request. I'm sure that you will be very familiar with this kind of request. Again, at the end of the month, the week, or the year, for different reasons, revenue, margin, or expediting some particular orders from the customer because the collab is critical and it's strategic for you to do so. Right? For a variety of reasons, you need to go and do something. It's what we call zero latency customer order backlog management. And in that situation, what we do in IBPX is that we provide to you with a promising overview of your orders, right? So your supply chain is going to deliver these customer orders this way, right? And then we provide you with a sandbox to try out different pull-in scenarios, right? So you pull in from different quarters, different, from the quarter to come or from the month to come, you pull in customer orders into the current period of time. Then the application, the solution, what it does is that we can generate inline constraint analysis for you to identify which one of the constraints that you are running with today is relevant to that pull-in. Is that feasible or not? And if it is not, which areas you need to modify manually in order to get that action implemented, right? And so you can evaluate those scenarios and determine which is the best way to pull in which customers and which units that according to your current constraints you can execute on. And when you are happy with it, then you just release the orders, right? And so you can do that loop very fast and inline and answer back to your CFO, well, I cannot do 100% what you said, but I can do this, this, and this, and I took the action already. You can count on that, okay? When you do planning, it's critical to understand what you are doing in terms of end-to-end profitability, right? So we wanted to incorporate that angle in IBPX. So in other words, it's not only about being able to replan, you need to understand what happens with your cost end-to-end and your margin. And it's not only by product, but also by customers. So we wanted to incorporate that what we call how do you identify profit winners, right? And how do you protect them when you are doing a new plan, right? And so it's not just only about doing the end-to-end plan, making sure that you can execute on that. It's also about picking up the proper alternative in terms of profitability and cost. This is another example about how to use AI. So we are creating quite a few of these embedded processes. This is just an example of one functionality that is being released very soon in our product, and so. So this is the situation in which you need to launch a new product, right? So in your plan, you have demand levels and supply levels, and you have technology that you could use to extrapolate what happened in the future, considering what had happened in the past. But there is a unique situation where you are launching a new product, right? And in that case, you don't have historical records of how the demand curve will be shaping up when you launch that demand in the different geographies, right? And so what we wanted to do here is to incorporate to the classic attribute-based planning algorithms. So in other words, you pick the attributes of the new product. Imagine this, a new phone, for instance, right? You pick attributes like price, size of the screen, weight, thickness, and so forth. And you pick those attributes from past products that you design. So we use algorithms to use, to define the new demand curve according to the behavior of the different markets against those attributes in the past. But then we are incorporating machine learning to define a new demand curve that could adapt better to these projected needs of different markets in that particular new product, right? So we are embedding, again, quite a lot of these AI-enabled new business processes into the IBPX framework. The other thing is we wanted to automate the reaction to those events that could be managed in that manner. So instead of just going with every one of the exceptions that are created to the management level and take human-based decisions that take time, we wanted to, again, reduce that latency as much as possible. So we are automating predictions from actuals and then creating processes that take care of those predictions. So before those events happen, you can really avoid those problems to happen, right? This is a general architecture where we see also some of the features that we are including in the product incorporates not only logical rule engines and AI detection, but we also use information data streams that are coming from sensors close to real time, right? That could be coming from SCADAs, from historians. So you get all those sensors generating big amounts of information that you could use to do predictions, right? In maintenance, in service breakdowns, and so forth, and in logistics arrivals, and then you could automate again corrections to those events as long as you have alternatives to solve them before they occur, right? And translate whatever is left to the management layer to take actions on that. This is kind of how we integrate that main flow of data, real-time data. Right. So I wanted to show to you a little bit the software that we are using, right? So you can take a look of it. So we created a demo that for those interested, you could contact some of our people in the field and get a deep dive on this thing. But the scenario that they wanted to create is basically the one you have in the screen. When you download the materials, there is a link here to the IBPX page in oracle.com, where you can find a video, a 4 minutes video, where we basically present that vision. And this is some use cases where that vision is crystallized, and we wanted to build those use cases in our cloud. We're using the software in our portfolio. And so here is the scenario that we will be seeing. So you are the finance head, for instance. I want you to use IBPX to detect a future drop in margin, and we will see how that happens. Once C detects that the future drop, what C will be doing is evaluating alternatives. It's like pumping up production of products with high margin to see if C can compensate that future drop in margin. And so C needs to simulate different scenarios, and when C is happy with one of them, what C does is the CFO moves that information to the rest of the company so they can consider the new plan and adjust if needed according to the real constraints that they have for executing that new set of numbers. And we will see a little bit how that process flows until they reach all of them an agreement on the proposal that has been made and the constraints that are needed to be attached to that proposal. And then we will move that plan into execution in one click. Imagine that that situation happens, then we could simulate using the same demo, you know, a supply chain disruption like the COVID one, or in this case, in the marketing and sales area, we could simulate a positive event, like, for instance, again, as I mentioned before, that one of your competitors went out of business in one particular market and you wanted to leverage that opportunity and simulate with different alternatives, send that for consideration, and once the agreement is reached, move that into execution. It is also an opportunity to see how this single view on the plan works. So in other words, you know, one single data model that is having different views by the different line of businesses, finance, marketing, and supply chain, with different KPIs, dashboards, where they evaluate the situation and try to detect those events I was mentioning before. So let me see if I can show you the way I did that. Let me see. All right, here. The way I did that was, let me see. So what you're seeing in the screen is that basically that story I was explaining to you before. And we have here the different steps that story need to take to become real, right? So we have areas where we could evaluate the performance using different dashboards, depending if you are finance, supply chain. Was that the question?
There was no question yet, Enrique. But I think we can go to Q&A anytime soon. So if you could wrap up the last bit, then we'll check the questions from the audience.
Okay, so I think that you said that there is no questions, but I couldn't hear you well, to be honest.
There are no questions yet from the virtual audience, but I suggest we go to the Q&A in a minute so we can check the questions from the live audience here on site as well.
Okay, perfect. So what you have here, I just wanted to show you the, for instance, how you could predict that drop in the net margin using the solution here. And as you see here, this is a video over the real demo. So you're seeing the real software doing that real time, where they focus on the net margin, right? You selected that variable to be predicted. You know how this variable will move into the will evolve in the future. You can run the simulation engine, change the time periods. And then here you have the prediction of the margin going down, right? And you could do identify the new products that need to be involved to close that margin gap. You could use Monte Carlo simulation. Let me see how, you know, here, what you are doing here is you are picking the variable that you want to change, the volume, the pattern, in order to model the new profit that you will be getting, right? you put limits to the simulation and start running it. And you see how those, actually I'm running 200 scenarios right now. And then you could evaluate the final outcome, the probability of that happening, and the risk associated to that. And so you could go all the story here and up to the point in which we can release the orders. We could do the reviews from the product, the demand viewpoint, engineering, approve the plan, and so forth. Right, so this is kind of a glance into the demo, how it looks like. I wanted to leave you just with a couple of customer stories. This is a high-tech company with a complex manufacturing, Uniper Networks. This is an example of a journey or how to think about maturity levels. As I was explaining to you before, they are running these improvement cycles for a few years already, looking for low-hanging fruit and in each one of the steps and driving up KPIs. In terms of lead time and inventory cost, they already deliver lead time improvements over 25% of the original ones, and inventory costs were down very significantly already. This is an industrial manufacturing company. They are world leaders in power generator and water technologies, working in the utilities area. And in this case, what they did is implement this closed loop where they work with this order backlog management process I explained to you before, but connecting that to the finance cockpit. So they could run this process, making sure that the profitability is always considered. In the essence of time, I tried to leave those 10 minutes for Q&A open. So guys, anything that you want to ask, this is the time to do so.